and welcome to another episode of the Dgmg podcast. My name is Zoe Lulinski, and today I'm going to be talking about some of the playoff games. As I'm recording this, the Rams-Vikings game has not happened quite yet. I'm not going to be able to film about that until next week, so hopefully I'll be able to talk about that. And then I'm also just going to be getting into some coaching candidates because it's off-season now. Postseason, off-season for most teams in the league, so I'm going to be getting into who I think has the best job opening, and then talk about some of the playoff games. Starting off, even though the Chargers-Texans game it was a big blowout, I actually found it pretty entertaining. That was probably one of the messiest first halves of an NFL playoff game I've seen in a super long time. The Texans had at least 3 fumbles in that game. Justin Herbert threw 4 interceptions, which is more than he threw in the entire season, which is just actually insane to me. I feel really bad for Justin Herbert and that Chargers team. Honestly, I really could have seen them go farther. I had the Chargers winning, so first game in my bracket was already messed up. But that happens. I didn't really have them going that far. But again, I actually did find it pretty entertaining despite the blowout. That first half and second half seemed like almost completely different games. I mean, the Texans did end up dominating, but it almost felt like the Chargers were dominating towards the beginning. So I found it entertaining. Moving on to that next game that happened later on in the day, the Steelers-Ravens. That one didn't surprise me all that much. You know, the Steelers have been on a 4-game losing streak coming into that game. I think there's definitely a major problem with the Steelers. They're inconsistent on offense. That defense has been carrying them. I don't think they've won a playoff game in nearly a little over half a decade. Yeah, I don't know what I'd prefer. Would I prefer to be a Steelers fan who gets to go to the playoffs every year, or would I prefer to be a Bears fan like I am and miss the playoffs every year and have hope for next year? I don't know. That's a tough decision. But the Ravens proved everything that I expected of them. They're still Super Bowl contenders. The AFC has 3, in my opinion, with the Bills, Ravens, and Chiefs. So that game kind of went as I expected. The Steelers have a lot of inconsistencies on offense I think they need to work out. And then moving on to that next game with the Bills and Broncos. Again, I kind of expected it. Bo Nix is at quarterback. He's a rookie. He did not play horribly for what the score shows. You know, that was a really great first drive by the Broncos. I think defense struggled a bit. It pointed out some holes that the Broncos are going to need to figure out. And then, again, just like the Ravens, the Bills proved to me that they are Super Bowl contenders. I'm super excited to see the Ravens and Bills play next week. That's going to be probably one of the highlight games of the playoffs even, and it's only the divisional round. Like, I feel like that could easily be a championship round. I'm excited to see it. I even think whoever wins this next game with the Ravens against the Bills, whoever wins that game is the MVP as well. I mean, Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen have a really close race, and it could really go to either of them in my opinion, so whoever wins that game. I know the Bills won in the regular season this year, but I do think just playoff level everything, I think whoever wins that game should win MVP. In my opinion. Moving on to the fourth game, the Packers versus Eagles. Again, it's kind of what I expected. I feel really bad for the Packers, actually. It feels really weird saying this, but, I mean, the whole offense was out, pretty much, by the end of the game. Elton Jenkins got hurt. Josh Myers got hurt. That offensive line was not an offensive line by the end of the game. And then they lost their top 3 receivers with Christian Watson getting out last week against the Bears. And then they lost their other top 2 in Romeo Doubs and Jaden Reed. Just really unfortunate coming in. I don't think they stood up much of a chance just from their injuries. And then the defensive side of the ball facing Saquon. Saquon, again, did what Saquon does. He could have had, another 70-yard touchdown if it weren't for him just running out the clock. However, I do think the Eagles do have to worry about their passing game. It's been a struggle for them all year, and it showed again against the Packers. That might just be something they have to worry about going into the divisional round. But I do feel kind of bad for the Packers. They just really didn't stand a chance with all the injuries they had. And then that Buccaneers-Commanders game, another game I got wrong. I got all of the upsets I chose wrong. Jaden Daniels played great. And I don't think I've ever seen a team get this lucky twice in the season. I mean, that game against the Bears early in the season, first half of the season, when they got the Hail Mary, and then pretty reminiscent of a game the Bears had a few years ago against the Eagles, that doink in on the kick. That's another lucky kick. I mean, they got 2 lucky game winners in one season, so lucky Commander fans. go Commanders. I think it'd be really cool to see the Commanders and Jaden Daniels go far in the playoffs, especially as he's a rookie. I think getting this experience is going to be really good for him in the long run as well. Moving on to head coach openings, Mike Vrabel was reported to be signing with the Patriots. I don't know if that's official yet, but I think it's a great fit. It's obviously his number one choice. He's a big leader of men. I think he's going to be great for that locker room. And then getting Drake May. From what I've heard, he has really good assistants lined up already as well. So he can bring the Patriots back to their glory days. But with the other openings, we have the Cowboys, Bears, Jaguars, Jets, Raiders, and Saints. I'm just going to list number one, who I think is the best opening. I do think the Bears have the best head coach opening out of those available. The Cowboys and Bears, in my opinion, are both set up to succeed next year. I can maybe even put in the Jets. The Jets do have a big question mark at quarterback, though, so they are just a bit lower. But the Bears, they have a lot of young stars. Rome Odunze and Caleb Williams were both just drafted this past year on offense. Jalen Johnson's still pretty young. They have a lot of weapons on defense still. They're really the only problem that they need to fix right now is the big men on both sides of the ball, defensive line and offensive line. But they also have a lot of draft capital. They have multiple picks within the first 3 rounds this year with that Panthers trade they made a few years ago with that number 1 overall pick. And then they also have a lot of cap space. They have $80 million in cap space still. I think that this is one of the top spots anyone would want to go to. And then just think about it. You look back at the 1985 Bears. That Super Bowl was decades ago, and Mike Ditka and all the players on that team are still immortalized and legends in the city of Chicago. If you win in Chicago, your name will forever be glorified in Chicago. I think that's a really attractive job opening. So it's one of the biggest cities in the country. A lot of history there, and then I think they also have room for immediate improvement. They had higher expectations. They are in a tough division, so that's one downside. But I also would put the Cowboys in a tougher division with the Eagles and the Commanders, both winning their playoff games this week as well. Moving on to the Cowboys. So Mike McCarthy and the Cowboys did not get a deal done, so I think they're going to let him walk, and they're going to be looking for another coach. Again, just similar to the Bears, like I mentioned, they have a lot of stars with CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons, 2 of the best at their position. And then it depends on how you look at it. I don't think quarterback will be a big issue. I think Dak Prescott's a solid quarterback who could lead them to the playoffs still, but it depends on how you look at that position. Dak Prescott could be a question mark at quarterback. I don't think he is. And then it's just, again, their history. They're a very historical franchise. If you succeed with the Cowboys, that's America's team. If you succeed as a Cowboys coach, you're going to be a legend. And then they're also poised for a big turnaround. Mike McCarthy was 49-35 in his time on the Cowboys, and he also had 3 playoff appearances. They did not meet expectations this past season, so that's a concern. But if you get the right coach, they could be right back in the playoff conversation for next year. And then at third, I do have the Jets. They have, again, a lot of young talent. Quinnen Williams, Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, Breece Hall. The only question mark is at quarterback. I don't think they should keep Aaron Rodgers. I think it was a mistake bringing him in the first place. He kind of took over that whole team in a way. Maybe we'll see Devontae Adams stay. Who knows? But they missed the playoffs for 14 straight seasons. It's in New York as well. I think that's another place where if you win, you're going to have a lot of success. Also, if you're hired there, you're going to have a new GM that you can pair with. The new GM coach tandem could be successful. They have 8 draft picks coming up in this draft so far. So I think they're definitely one of the attractive job openings that they have as well. And then next, they do have the Jaguars. The Jaguars, they're confusing because they really did have a bit higher expectations. They have not been great. They have Trevor Lawrence, a couple weapons. Brian Thomas is a rookie. They have some offensive guys there, but I think the big question mark for the Jaguars is, they opted to keep their GM Trenton Bullock, which might be what's scaring some of the top options away. But that division, as opposed to the Jets, Bears, and Cowboys, who are all in, especially the Bears, very tough divisions. The Jaguars are in a winnable division. The Texans are the only team in that division right now that is pretty solid. The Titans are struggling. The Jaguars themselves are struggling. The Colts are, 50-50. They could be good or they could be bad. So I think that's a very winnable division. So that could also become an attractive spot for that situation. And then lastly, I have the Raiders and Saints. They're both having question marks at quarterback. I think the Saints might opt to keep Derek Carr, but they really don't have a lot of cap space. They're actually negative, so you're not going to be able to make any quick moves. However, I think if you make some of the right decisions, they do have a winnable division, which makes it so if you just get a couple more wins, you can even get into the playoff conversation. The Raiders, I think Tom Brady being a partial owner plays a large part in the opportunities with the Raiders head coaching job. I think he's going to have a lot of say in that organization and a big, strong voice. They don't have a quarterback at this moment, so that might be a problem, but I think Tom Brady being there makes the Raiders job a larger opening for some of the top candidates. Thank you guys for listening. This was a bit of a shorter episode. I appreciate you guys taking your time to listen. Don't get me going, and I'll see you guys next week.